Hello and welcome to Divided We Fail, a front porch political chat podcast. I am Travis, one of three hosts, joined by Cody and James. Hello, gentlemen.
How you
Hello,
doing?
gentlemen.
I am as well as one can be. We'll say that. A lot's popped off since we last chatted. Um, I went into the land of plenty up north. Uh, the New York
Right.
Rangers. The New York Rangers are really bad at hockey, and I
Oh,
am
Canada.
I am aggressively dropping into a what's Cody? What's the psychological term for when like things are so stressful that you just focus all your energy on one thing?
Oh, uh, I think it's just like hyperfixation distraction.
Yeah, that's me with Pokemon cards right now. It's my entire existence.
Yeah, it's just pretending nothing else exists, focusing on that one thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's what I do. That's how I get by these days. So I don't know if that's a thing that I should worry about or if I'm just gonna keep chugging on. Either way, I started a YouTube channel, so well, you follow the Instagram, you know.
yeah,
Um, what about you, Cody? How was your last couple weeks?
uh, all right, just getting my money's worth in therapy. That's about it.
Your own therapy or giving therapy?
Oh, in my own therapy,
Okay.
which considering my insurance pays for it, thankfully, is I'm just going every week because it's stressful times.
Yeah. James, check in. How you doing? How's dad life?
Bad life's good. It's been a little bit of a rough week, but we're getting through.
What are we going through? Like a sleep
You know,
regression or something?
no, actually, my sleep's been great because of my CPAP, but just some personal stuff, work stuff. Lost somebody I work with, and hit hard, and
Yeah.
just getting through it.
All right. Well, we today figured that we would address the elephant in the room, which is government efficiency. Obviously, the past 6 weeks, nothing. Actually, yeah, we're about 6 weeks in. Nothing has been a bigger headline than the Department of Government Efficiency. Elon Musk and his Doge members have gone through department after department and done the changes that they saw fit for that scenario. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's a real hot button issue, and we figured that we would discuss amongst ourselves where we think government efficiency should be, how it should be addressed, and ways that we think the government can improve their governmentalness. I don't think that's a word, but you understand what I'm saying. Their administrative processes, that's the word we'll use. And yeah, so we figure we just kind of give you a down to earth perspective that's not full of screaming and yelling and telling you to go burn a Tesla or telling you that you don't like autistic people. Um, Kicking things off, I'm going to yield the floor to James, our resident conservative, to talk about his view on government efficiency and his implementation, like how he would go about kind of shrinking the government and making it work more efficiently. So the floor is yours, sir.
Well, I start off with by default, um, conservatism naturally ties to a lessened government power, if that makes sense. Um, the whole premise is less federal power, more states' rights, more state power, and actually just less governmental power in general, not even just federal but state. Um, but I look at some of the things that Doge has done, um, and this is from their website,
Hmm.
and some of the things they have done, I'm actually like in huge favor of. Things like, let me see. Okay, so cutting things like the examples I'm going to give, I think are needed to be done. and I don't know. I mean, some of the stuff you guys might disagree with, but this is just my personal opinion on it. Um, they one of the big ones in 2020, 2021, SBA granted 5,593 loans for $312 million borrowers whose only listed owner was 11 years or younger at the time of the loan. That sounds like fraud. Um, things like that. Oh, I had a list. Okay. The VA canceled a $56,000 contract to water 8 plants. And they even have a picture of the sign that says, "Please do not water these plants. These plants are served by a plant contractor. Thank you." Why are I mean, on the grand scheme things, like this is so minuscule. It's not huge, but $56,000 a year to water plants. Um, they canceled all the software licenses that weren't being used. So there were 35,000 ServiceNow licenses on 3 products, only used by 84. 11,000 Acrobat licenses with 0 users. 800 Westlaw clinic licenses with 216 in use. There's 13,000 employees at across the agencies, and there were 37,000 WinZip licenses, 19 training software subscriptions. Things like that need to be kicked in terms of saving money. Um, Again, if it were up to me, which it's not, there until we get ourselves squared away, until we have our citizens not deciding whether or not to pay their bills or eat, I would not be sending billions of dollars elsewhere. Um, in my mind, government should be stripped down to what is needed to survive, I guess, is an example. Um, there are some things that the government has that I agree with, like Medicare, Medicaid for people with disabilities, for older folks, so on and so forth. Um, Food stamps and WIC, if people need it, they need it. Like, if you have a child and one parent walks out, one parent dies, something happens, that shouldn't necessarily mean that that child's got to suffer. Um, I think we can all attest to we've been in relationships where we thought it was going to go the distance, and that happened not to be the case. Like, things happen. So, while I say strip down the government, I think you strip down where it's necessary, if that makes sense. The needed stuff. If it's going to be you you don't remove stuff that puts people's lives in danger. And there's
How
a
are we
lot of programs.
defining what puts someone's life in danger? Someone's actual physical life or their livelihood? I just want to clarify that real quick.
Their physical life. So the problem I have with livelihood is it can be taken in a way. So, like, for example, I've worked with somebody before who got offered a promotion, pay raise, the whole nine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Refused to take it
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't want to lose their food stamps and all that. that's not threatening their livelihood because they have the opportunities to be able to take care of themselves, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So that's the problem I have with livelihood is because if they, all right, take that away, you are technically hurting their livelihood, but they're abusing the system already, if that makes sense.
I hear what you're saying, but I want to clarify in that someone writes. Do you know what the state cutoff is for food stamps, or HEAP, or
Um,
WIC, or any of those things?
I don't in New York State, no.
Okay. Do you
I
know how
can.
much that person was being offered?
I know it was at least an extra $3 an hour at
Okay.
minimum.
So
But again,
do you
now
know how
keep
many
in
kids
mind,
they had? Just so I can give you a roundabout number.
2.
2? So 3
Mhm.
people. Okay. So let's say 3 people, $4,304 a month. You can keep talking for a minute. I'm going to do some math.
So here's the thing, though. The wife in the situation didn't work either
Oh, so
because
there
then they'd
was
lose their benefits.
4 people.
Yes. But
Okay.
again,
Now,
and
do you
this
know
comes,
for certain the wife didn't work because they would lose their benefits or because they didn't have
yes,
child care?
the benefits. They
Okay.
told me all this stuff.
Okay, because I also want to
Why? I
make the
don't know. But
distinction that unless you get an insanely lucky deal, the cost of childcare is around $400 to $800 a week per kid.
and I understand that kids are in school though.
Yeah, but they're in school 10 months out of the year. So,
Yeah, but we're talking 13 and 15. They can stay home by themselves at that point.
okay.
13, 15, 13, 16, something like that.
Okay. But
You know what I'm
that's
saying?
not every single person's situation, and I understand
No,
what you're saying.
no. And like, I understand it to an extent. If it's going to put you $100 over the limit and you're going to struggle, I understand. But when you are actively doing things because of your you want to keep those benefits. I mean, in that you're when you do that, you're not counting in the they would get 15 more hours a week minimum
Oh,
with the
so they
chance of
weren't
overtime.
working full time.
No, they weren't working full time.
Okay.
So there's, to me, efficiency when it comes to that would be cleaning out abuse. Um,
Sure.
I I firmly believe if you are going to be getting the assistance, a drug test should be a thing. That's firmly, and there's a lot of people that disagree with it. And as far as
Mhm.
like marijuana goes, now that it's legal, you don't have to worry about that. But I've seen abuse of government programs working at grocery stores. You see it a lot
Mhm.
where on the 1st or the 15th, they come in, take the cash off their card, and buy a couple cartons of cigarettes.
Yeah. I'm not going to
Like,
argue with you that the abuse exists. I know it exists. I'm not delusional. I've worked in food service. I've worked in retail. I'm familiar with the fact that the abuse exists. But I think there's also a different approach. But I want to hear the end of your approach. Sorry.
so my approach would be getting rid of the abuse, right?
Oh,
100%. That's what I mean, but that comes down to efficiency, right?
right. But
So
I'm
if you
saying
can clean up
how do
abuse,
you how
and
do you
there's,
define and track and get rid of the abuse?
I mean, honestly, you hire contractors right now. You put things in the way. So it says if you're doing meth and crack, you're not getting your food stamps. That's where I stand on that. I think it's one of those things where, and it sounds harsh, but if you can afford meth and crack, you should be able to buy yourself food. Because this shit's not cheap.
Meth is pretty cheap.
But I don't know the price of meth off the top of my head. But
Working in the places I've worked, meth is cheap. The most expensive drugs you can purchase are pure cocaine and pure ecstasy, and the places where you're running into those problems, like those aren't the issues that people are having who are on these government subsidies, right? The drugs that people often struggle with who are on these government subsidies are things like heroin and meth, because meth doesn't require a whole lot to make, and heroin is cut with 13,000 other things. So it's cheap.
so let me put it this way. For you to get housing, food stamps, the whole shebang, you should be drug free. Someone saying, hey, we're going to pay for you to live somewhere. We're going to make sure there's food on your table. You have one thing that we can't have you doing. And I
So
firmly believe, I think our rehab system is fucked too. And I think that's a big part of the problem.
I don't disagree with you there.
I
I've
mean,
worked in various
when it
versions of it. And I
when it
will
comes
tell
to like
you, sorry, go ahead.
when it comes to the drug problem,
Mhm.
I have, I don't want to say liberal stance, but that's where I'm more moderate, is if somebody needs help, we should give them help, and it shouldn't be for 10 days.
Yeah,
It
I don't
shouldn't be
disagree.
you're in for 10, they kick you out, you get back into your drugs again, then you shouldn't be that.
Yeah, I don't disagree. The whole
And
system fucked because of health insurance and money, and yeah, absolutely
yeah,
1,005%. I've worked in various versions of those places, including a
so
jail, a halfway house, and opioid treatment program.
yeah. So I
So
think
you're saying you hire government contractors to weed out the people who are abusing the system.
yes. And I've seen it before where drug
And the people
dealers
who are using
get
drugs. I have seen where people trade their food stamps and other things to drug dealers for drugs, right? Whether
I've
it's
seen
giving them their benefit card, but
I've
go
seen
ahead.
drug dealers who have food stamps and all that because technically speaking they don't have any income.
Right, they drive like a brand new Cadillac Escalade to the grocery store. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm familiar with
Yeah.
that entire concept.
So
I've worked with some of them.
find those instances of abuse and cut them out.
Sure. So,
I mean, you're going to pay somebody, but you're going to
right,
save that money. And
how much are you going to pay these contractors to do this? Because it
you
seems
put
like a
out
lot of
bids.
paperwork, right? But right, let's say you put
But
out
again,
bids
you
to
still
do all these
have
things, and this is an ongoing issue, so you have someone continuously ongoing bidding on these things because it doesn't go away or dissolve
no.
itself in any quick
Well,
fashion.
here's an idea: create the jobs. Create the jobs. You
What
have
jobs?
the jobs to investigate this stuff.
Hmm.
You have how many military members that are homeless or looking for jobs all the time? If they have any, I mean, they got security clearance. I'm sure they have investigative abilities.
Yeah, but you would want
I mean,
someone
you
who
could
understands financial fraud. So you'd want someone who maybe has a bachelor's in some degree of math or accounting to be able to track these things. And they'd have to have access to the Internal Revenue Service to see purchases and other things that are being made by these people. So, right, even if it's in cash, like we're probably talking what I would have to guess on average is 1 week of work for each person to investigate just one individual.
Again,
And I might be overshooting. I don't know how long it would take, right? Because you're probably pulling from things like social media, pulling from uh, tax documents, uh, prior W-2s, probably having someone go investigate in the field.
but again, you do this and you can save that money, if that makes sense.
Theoretically, sure. I
So
also
we start by
go ahead.
cutting out the abuses. That's step one. Then two, go through, and if there's any way to streamline the paperwork so there's not 5 people looking at the same piece of paper before it's getting approval, cut those jobs.
Okay.
Cut things that stop the spending that we don't need. I mean, the US has an exorbitant amount of money that's spent on just things that aren't needed.
hmm I,
Um,
I I don't disagree with you. The military is the worst of all of them,
the
and
military spends way more money than it needs to.
by a long
Don't
shot,
get me
because
wrong,
they aren't good at keeping track of the things that they already have and don't catalog things properly.
and I'm talking yearly audits down to 6-month audits. And if you're failing audits, it's a top-down thing.
Right.
Okay, you
But the
failed,
military, the Department of Defense hasn't passed an audit the entirety of my life.
and exactly, and whoever's responsible for the military at that time needs to be fired. And
Right.
I
But the
don't care how long many
problem
years you've
is the
had on the job.
president is responsible for the military at that time.
Well, whoever's below the president, because the president's not looking at every dollar that the military
Right. To
spends, if
the
that
step
makes
in
sense.
there would be the SecDef. That I assume that would be who would be held responsible for that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
sure.
if the
But
Secretary of Defense isn't meeting his audits, goodbye. Sucks to
sure, but
suck.
that's a presidential appointed position.
Okay, and if I'm in charge of it and I'm president, guess what? You're gone.
Oh, so that
Plain and
implies there
simple.
has to not be bias into how this works.
Yeah, no. Going
Okay.
into this, in my ideal world, there's left and right, but they get along like we do on this lovely show. They
Sure.
have the
I
conversations.
I
This
disagree
is
with the
utopic.
left and
This
right
is,
portion. I just think there is people working for the common good of everyone.
yeah.
But
So, well, I meant like you're still going to have those parties. I don't think, and even in my utopia, I don't think we're ever getting away from a two-party system.
fuck that. If it's my
I
utopia,
mean,
we're getting rid of the party system because it's stupid.
but, and another thing is clearing out your data roles. So there was, I can't find the exact numbers here, but there was millions of dollars paid out to people who were over the age of 115.
Mm.
Um, I don't know
And
about you guys. I don't think there's that many people living above 115. So again, figuring out where money's being spent, figure out where that money's going, and cut it. It's easy for me to sit here and say, "Oh yeah, just cut everything all the extra spending and stuff." But there's so much fine tuning and details that go into every little thing. I think like looking into not necessarily the Department of Education, but if you look at Detroit, they spend the most money in the country per student, and they still have horrible grades. Why is that happening? So even on a micromanagement scale, okay, you're getting this money. What are you spending this money on? How is this helping? If it's not helping, how can we redirect it to where it's being useful? And I think that's a lot of the problem is we have all this spending and we say, all right, well, they're overspending, we're going to cut it. But instead of saying, okay, you have this money, right? You have this money right here. How can you make this more? What are you doing with, if you've got, say I'm a university and I have $1 million going towards the library, right? Per year, $1 million a year towards the, okay, can I spend half of that on the library, considering very few people go into the library and you read the book, you can get all this information when I
You're
can
cut,
take, what's that?
you're cutting out something fierce.
Oh
Maybe it's
shit.
just for me. I'm not sure. Um,
No, he
but
was in and out for me too. I got the gist of
okay.
what he was saying, but he was in and out.
Yeah, and
So
I get your point about the $1 million a year on the library, but how much does it cost to run a library? Who knows? None of us do. And how often is a library on a college campus used for computer labs and other things, which does add up fairly quickly when you're considering firewalls, security, internet, just general maintenance of a building that large.
no, I'm not saying cut the library. I'm saying if you're spending $1 million a year on new hardcover books and you're spending it on a staff whose sole purpose is to just reorganize the books,
Mhm.
why wouldn't you take that $250,000 and instead of putting it into that library, put it into creating an online library? I'm not saying dismantle the library, because there's a lot of students go there to actually like study and do their homework and focus on things. But what I'm saying is why use the money in more impactful ways.
So
What's going to get more use, those books, or if you create an online library
since we're
where
talking about, go ahead, sorry.
instead of going in and getting the book and looking through it, you can go online, read the book online, you can find certain sections you're looking for a lot quicker, and then have the tools where you can it can help you put in a source, like help you source something,
Sure.
right? Would you not find that more beneficial? I mean, when I was in college and I'm going to be back, I would find that more beneficial sitting in a library, if that makes sense,
I
reading
would
old books.
personally, I would not. I would rather have the books to source while I'm typing a paper. Um, but since we're talking about efficiency and spending money, what about all the PPP loans that were forgiven during the pandemic for people like Jared Kushner, Tom Brady, Reese Witherspoon, Paul Pelosi, Khloe Kardashian, people
No,
who are worth millions of dollars,
none of
whom,
that would be forgiven. That's a loan.
right, but all
It's a
of
loan,
those
not a
things
grant.
were forgiven.
And they shouldn't have
Amounts
been.
forgiven for Jared Kushner: 805,000, 1.588 million, and 636,000 and 890,000, all including the interest on those loans, were forgiven. Someone
They
who
should
has a
not have been.
net worth of around $800 million. And I get that net worth is not liquid funds, but
But again, that stuff shouldn't have been forgiven. That shouldn't have been a
oh,
loan. Or that should have
I,
been a loan. But
it
it
was a
should have
loan.
been a loan, not a grant.
It wasn't a
Well, what's
grant.
the point in calling it a loan when you're going to treat it like?
That's a great question. I don't know. But
I
when we're
mean,
talking
that's
about the
just
amount of money forgiven there, right,
yeah.
as
Oh,
opposed to
absolutely.
$1 million a year at a library, and those
I
are
was
just
using
the top
I was
60 things.
using I was
I know
using the
you're
library as
using examples.
that wasn't like a
That wasn't a
set in
tangible
stone way.
example, right?
Yeah.
I get that. But the other part of this is we frivolously spend money on things like trying to keep companies in America instead of incentivizing them other ways, paying people way larger sums of money than they actually need to make, um, incentivizing health insurance companies to participate in Medicare and Medicaid instead of just having a condition of operating for those health insurance companies. Hey, if you're going to provide health insurance in this country, you have to provide these things as well. It's not an option, it's an expectation.
Like I said, when we talk healthcare, Jesus fuck. One second.
And to take it back even further, right? The healthcare stuff. Don't you think the issue with the drugs, the fentanyl, the heroin, the meth, if we invested money differently in healthcare through taxpayer dollars so that we had universal healthcare, people would be able to handle and manage their mental health and their physical health and be less likely to abuse the system.
I would wager.
Because part of the reason people abuse the system is because there isn't a step down program from the system. It's once you cross a dollar threshold, you're cut off. There is no, oh, we'll give you 50% of your food stamps for a year. Technically, what? Hello?
Hello?
Hey. So, what I was saying was there are, like, if we did universal health care, the issue with drugs would be less of an issue because most people are abusing drugs to try and manage some degree of mental health and or just not, or whether it be trauma, abuse, neglect. So if we had universal healthcare, which I understand would cost more taxpayer dollars, I'm not delusional, don't you think there would be less people abusing the system, as well as if there were a step down program from these different benefits like food stamps, WIC, the housing programs, instead of there just being a hard, fast dollar amount where it's like, haha, you make 1 penny too much, goodbye. So that
No,
people
I
can
agree. I
learn
think
how to be financially literate on their own, as opposed to having this wealth gap disparity where the wealthiest person in the country is worth 200 and some odd $billion, and my net worth is negative because I have a mortgage and student loans.
no, I wholeheartedly agree. There should be a sliding scale to it. There shouldn't be a definite cutoff. Um,
Well, and I think
between
with the universal
between
health care,
like
you'd see a lot less of the drug abuse impacting people abusing the system because the drug abuse would be less rampant because people would be able to get the care they need instead of having situations of chronic homelessness or being in and out of rehabs because the focus is on making money off people instead of helping them get better.
I don't believe in universal healthcare. I don't believe in
Why?
free healthcare for all. I don't think it's plausible. I think there's already too many
We are the
hitches in our system.
wealthiest country in the nation. We are the wealthiest country in the world. How is it not plausible? Because Canada,
We are
Costa
trillions
Rica,
of
which
dollars
is,
in debt.
we are still one of the wealthiest countries in the world.
Yeah, but
Costa Rica can provide universal health care.
also the debt is like made
How
up.
many-
Like people talk about the debt, but the debt doesn't exist in terms of like a tangible asset. So like it's yeah, like China and whatever hold the debt, but at the end of the day, like we hold a shit ton of economic welfare over China as well. So like it doesn't it's an offset thing. It's like kind of like holding each other accountable. As far as the debt goes, it's just a made up thing that politicians use to talk about the government. It doesn't have any bearing on anything unless we default on our loans.
So another one of the big reasons is I don't want government in my healthcare, my body at all.
They're not. They're just paying for it.
Right. They
When
just
you
pay
pay
for it
for
like
it,
every other country. No, but in
when
Canada,
you pay
the
for it,
government
you
pays
can
for
then
it, and you get to make any choice you want.
Canada's healthcare system right now is not in good shape.
When's the last time you tried to schedule with a new primary care physician? Because the last time I did it took me 6 months.
2 years
And
ago,
I have good health insurance. I have
it
really good
took.
health insurance, and it took me 6 months to get in with a new primary care physician.
So here's the
It's
thing. Anyway,
their
I
system is not
understand
any
it
more
takes time.
fucked than our system is.
Look at the way our VA is ran.
Yeah, but the
Look
VA,
at that's a government
it
run.
I know, but it's not a 1-to-1. You're saying look at the way the VA is run. The VA is underfunded on purpose because of they don't throw money into it. If you don't have private medical situations and then private pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies lobbying politicians to not fund the VA and Medicare because they want people on private healthcare insurance, those problems become null and void. Like you say, look at the VA, but if you look at the NHS or Germany's healthcare system or Japan's healthcare system, like all of those nations take care of people, and their health outcomes are better, their infant mortality rate is better, their rates of chronic disease are better, and they're all government funded healthcare systems because there is no incentive to treat, there's incentive to cure. Whereas we live in a profit healthcare system, so the incentive is to treat, not to cure.
The incentive is to manage symptoms, not to cure or provide consistent quality treatment. Costa Rica
Okay,
doesn't even have astronomically close to the same GDP we do. And they have universal health care, and they also have the largest per capita number of people who live past 100. And it is certainly not because the way they drive, because the way they drive on those scooters is enough to give anyone a panic attack.
but you got to look again at population too.
Right, but
How many more people
per
do we have
capita.
than them?
No. You're missing the point. Per capita, average for total population.
Right. And then per capita,
So again,
the United States has more wealth than any other country on earth, and that's so that
Correct.
we have more money to spend per citizen than any other country, and every other country attains it, no problem.
Right.
so again, I'm going to go into government ran. I don't want government running health. I don't think it's government's place to run healthcare. I don't think
But they don't
job.
run it. They fund it. They fund it because it is a tax. It is a basic human right in other countries, and it is treated as such in the same way that they fund WIC and other things and food stamps and HEAP.
I guess one of my big questions for you, James, is that what gives you more trust in a private insurance company?
Because they're still about profit.
Right. Their goal isn't to treat you.
I
Their goal is to make money off of you. So I just am curious where that perspective comes from.
Think about it the same way you think about like car insurance or homeowners insurance. Their whole goal is to make money off your premium. That's exactly how the healthcare system works.
So
They're
as I've said before, and I will say it again, I think healthcare needs to be labeled not for profit. That's where I stand on that. I think getting rid of that healthcare for Americans would be 1,000 times better than a
I don't disagree with
Yeah,
you.
and then
But the only way to get it to be not for profit is to have it be a government funded thing. Because that's the only way that has worked in the free world up to this point.
I don't think that's going to be the only way to solve that issue. I think the way to do it is if you make these companies not for profit, you're going to get more money spent on finding cures, doing more research by making it so that it's a universal healthcare system. You're taking away the incentives for creating new things, whether it's
Not
new drugs, new treatments, new all of that. Then you don't have a choice either. So I'm big on
Can you back up? You said taking away the profit motive eliminates the basis of creating new drugs.
creating a system where you have universal healthcare takes away the incentive to create new things.
I'm going to just interject there and say that is patently incorrect. So this is just some fun statistics for everybody. 99.7% of novel chemical compounds are discovered by state state-funded universities. They are found in research labs at state-funded universities, which is what people talk about cutting cancer research. They're not talking about cutting it from, Johnson & Johnson. They're talking about cutting it from the University of Alabama. That's where those are found. Over 90% of a pharmaceutical corporation's R&D does not exist in novel compounds. It exists in novel expenditures. So in novel ways to give you the medicine, because that's what extends their patents. So for example, you have hydrochlorothiazide, which is a well-known blood pressure medicine. I don't know what the original brand name was, but there is a pill form, a capsule form, and then there's an extended release form. So they would have come out with the pill form, which was a pressurized powder, and then their R&D would have been to come up with the capsule. And so once they come up with the capsule, that patent extends, so they're still the only company allowed to do it. And then they come up with the extended release, which once again extends their whole basis, everything about their R&D has nothing to do with creating new cures and new medicines. It's all to do with extending the patents on the medicines that they own. Like I said, 99.7% of novel chemical compounds come from publicly funded research. So we pay for these. We pay as taxpayers for these medicines, and then the pharmaceutical companies take the patents, buy them from the university, and then charge us back for our own research.
And as long as they control the patent, they can charge whatever the fuck they want. A good example of this is, I'm sure every single one of us knows someone with ADHD. Vyvanse is a great example of a medication that is beneficial for people with ADHD. I had a client who didn't have insurance because they were a doctoral student at a university. They were going to be charged $368 a month just to get ADHD medication. It's criminal to charge someone $368 a month. And that's just because they could. And that isn't even a life-saving medication. But EpiPens are a great example. The average cost of an EpiPen in the United States is $300 each. That is a life-saving medication. It is a preventative, life-saving medication that is sometimes covered by insurance and sometimes not. $300 a piece, $600 for two, and anytime you get them, it is recommended that you get two in case you have to use one so you have a spare.
Either way, there's various numbers that show that a universal healthcare system would actually save the United States money in healthcare outcomes than it would cause us to spend more money, but it's here nor there.
The problem is we use the universal healthcare system isn't used by large populous countries. It's not a commonplace in any large country. So again, you have to look at the population, right? That would cost, an estimation would be 32 to 44 trillion across 10 years for this system. You're talking another 11% in taxes to cover some of that.
Sure, you know where you get that 11%?
Your paycheck.
No, you don't put a cap on income tax. Yeah. So you just pay more taxes the more money you make. It doesn't matter if you make $1 billion. The percentage just continues to increase the more money you make.
But also, you're building a scenario in which it's totally free, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Like South Korea is considered to be the best healthcare system in the entire world by the OECD.
It is not totally free.
It is 60% covered by the government. And so they also, what they do is what government, and specifically what the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party has been pushing for a long time, which is not a completely covered universal healthcare where like the U.S. pays every amount. It's basically universal Medicare where everybody can be on Medicare. So that way Medicare has the leverage to negotiate the drug prices, because if everybody's on Medicare, then you can say, these are the prices for medicine. So then what happens is that the people that don't need to be on Medicare, i.e. the three of us, they go in and they say, listen, your Medicare coverage, super minimal. We're going to give you like 30%, 40% coverage. You've got private healthcare insurance. They're going to buck up the bill from there. And then you go in, but overall costs are way, way, way down. And healthcare outcomes are way, way up because nobody's worried about paying anything because what the government doesn't pay, your insurance pays. There is no copay. There are no premiums. It's just private insurance is there to cover the difference that government can't pay because our population is too large.
Right. And your workplace
That
covers
is
the
something
premium.
that is something I'd be willing to listen to and sit down and talk about.
Yeah, I think
But
that's
there
the
are
system that
things
works.
But there are things where I don't want government. Government shouldn't have any involvement in it. And the biggest problem is we can sit here and say, hey, you know, the government's not going to get involved in our body and decisions that we're making for our bodies. Shit. You and I, we all know damn well if the government saw an opportunity to get into that, they would do it. And there
Right,
would
because the
be
current
some
structure
tyrant.
of our government is entirely flawed. It has nothing to do with that system not working. It has to do with our government structure not working for the people and working for lobbyists.
Right. And
Travis has said it
And
before.
again,
You have to cut the lobbying completely out for our government system to work for the people.
and I also see where James is coming from because if you put yourself on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? So, in terms of government overreach, put yourself in a state where it's or like the federal government, right? So you're in a state where abortion's legal, but the federal government doesn't like it. So then the federal government steps in and says we're not covering abortions. And tantamount to eliminating abortion as an issue from the federal level because they're saying we're not covering that anymore. It doesn't matter what state you're in, whether it's legal in your state or not. The federal government has determined we will not cover that procedure, and so they can now leverage the Medicare. So I think that's the scenario that James is talking about. I was just trying to paint a picture for everybody.
Right.
yeah,
And
that's the situation I'm looking at because I'm not going to lie to you. I'm pro-choice ish to an extent.
Yeah.
I cheered up and down when Roe was overturned. I think it's probably the best thing the government's done in a long time, and it wasn't because I'm anti-abortion. It's because it's the state right and should be a state right. I don't think federal government should have any stance in gay marriage, abortion, anything like that. That government should be out of that completely.
I disagree with you, but I disagree with you because I think it is important for the federal government to protect the rights of individuals even when the state won't.
But
And
what I'm saying is even the state shouldn't have that right to tell you
well, I don't
when it
disagree
comes to
with you
gay
there
marriage.
or abortion, really. Because
We'll get into
either way,
abortion on another
I,
episode.
I get what you're saying,
I'm
James, but
not opening
either
that door
way,
right here.
right, but listen for a second. Either way, you're giving a governing body power that they should not have, whether it be the state or the federal government. If you're talking about limiting government ability to make choice for people and their bodily autonomy, there has to be a protection somewhere because if not, and you're just leaving it up to the power of these two entities, one of them is going to take the power. You get what I'm saying? Like,
I
if you
get
leave
what
it
you're
up to
saying.
states, and people don't have the option to just move from a state because they don't like its policies. Because moving is expensive, it requires resources that not everyone. So, if you're going to protect human rights on a basic level, you have to do it as a whole or not give anyone the power to change that decision for anyone. So you either have to take power away from the state and federal government, which the three of us know won't happen anytime soon, or you have to protect it on a federal level.
I'm not going to delve into this argument right now. I want to save that for an episode devoted to it, if that makes sense.
That's fine.
Right, but I'm not even talking
I'm
about
not.
abortion so much as I'm talking about anything related to human rights.
I agree for the most part. But again, that's a whole different episode. Because that'll be a conversation. We'll be here 6 hours.
6 hours is crazy.
I'm just saying. So, where were we before abortion?
We were talking about
Oh,
finances.
government intervention.
Yeah.
Well, we were specifically talking about spending money and cutting back on inefficient spending. That was the entire premise of our podcast today.
So, yes. So, my argument, my biggest between the cost, because when you hear universal health insurance, because healthcare and health are not.
You're cutting in and out, bud.
So, that stupid fucking piece of shit. Oh, that didn't cut out, did it?
No.
So again, when it comes to healthcare, health insurance, there's a difference. Healthcare is the care you get, health insurance is pay for. When I hear free health insurance for everybody, I'm thinking of all the problems Canada has with overburdening the systems. Then you have the cost aspect of it. I'm willing to sit down and talk and listen about maybe a partial system, like in South Korea. But just stand up overall, free for everything's covered. I don't want America to sustain that, and I don't really want the government intervening because once you give them the opportunity, they will. And that's the one thing that, honestly, why I have guns in my house, and it has nothing to do with, everybody. Home defense. I will use it if I need to in a home defense. That is a part of it, but an overreach of government, I think, honestly, now is more likely than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And to say I'm very unenthused and displeased with this administration is an understatement. But again, cutting things like they're doing with NOAA, dismantling the Department of Education as a whole. There are a lot of things this government's doing in the name of efficiency that I wholeheartedly disagree with. We can sit here and go through each department and go through little nuances. The fact of the matter, at the end of the day, if you're going to change something and you're going to do it in lieu of another system, like they're doing with the Weather Channel buying out local radio station meteorologists or local radio or TV stations. So now in Louisiana, they're coming up on an event like this weekend,
Yeah.
and their main source is going to be the Weather Channel, whose job is to disperse weather for the whole United States. Things like that, you're putting everybody who lives in those areas square in the firing range. They're staring down the barrel, and all you did was loaded a bolt. So there's a lot of things they're cutting and they're getting rid of that I wholeheartedly agree with or disagree with, and there's things that they're we should have done that years ago. It's hard to go through every little thing there because it feels like every day they're cutting 10,000. But again, it all boils down to I would cut everywhere I could without putting people in jeopardy. Because at the end of the day, with the government we have, there's already so much overreach that that they shouldn't be, that cutting it now is going to hurt people.
Right.
So I wouldn't put it in a situation where I'm taking away and hurt. But
And
some of these things, it's just
I'm with you. I think one of the biggest things when I think about government efficiency has nothing to do with like stripping departments and things like that. Like, so obviously I work in the construction field. One of the things that's part of my job is data collection and administration. So like there are so many redundant features of the government, like you talked about earlier. Like if I can go into a department and eliminate jobs that are the same job with just a different lettering on it, then I'll do that. Because that's how you eliminate the bullshit. That's how you eliminate the red tape. That's how you eliminate the constant feel like, you submit anything, you know how it is. You submit anything to the government and it feels like it's going to be 3 weeks to 6 weeks before you even hear back because it's got to go through so many gates. And it's like, if we just eliminated that bullshit, I can't even fathom how much money we'd save. And in my opinion, the government would operate in a much more lean and efficient capacity. Like, we don't need to strip down the EPA to nothing, but I'm sure that there's a good cluster of jobs that are just people that are in essence pencil pushers that are just there to cover a a document or cover a specific project, and like a job that one person's doing that could easily be split up among 3 other people. And like, yeah, okay, well, your workload's increased, but in relative comparison, so like, and once again, using my job, like I know for a fact at the state level, they have one project manager, one construction manager per job in each department. So like if you have OGS, you're on the OGS job, that one specific job until it's done. If you work for Parks and Rec, you're on that one specific job until it's done. Whereas in my private firm, our PMs are doing anywhere from 5 to 7 jobs, and we're fine. We get paid, we get through it. Everything gets built on time. So like, I don't understand why they need to be so hyper focused when they could easily just have the same situation as the private sector, where one person is covering multiple things as opposed to being in charge of one little thing and sitting there and making sure it's perfect.
So I have a question for you, Trev.
Yeah.
And Cody.
Well,
honestly,
Cody is away from keyboard right now.
Okay. So if you are at work, right?
Yep.
And you have more work than you have day, right? You're done in an hour, you got about 2. What do you do?
If I have 2 hours worth of
You have
work
about
with an
2
hour
hours worth
left,
of work left in an hour before your shift ends. What do you do?
I mean, I'm salary, so I stay, but
I mean, I'm not salary, I stay.
yeah.
And I think that's the biggest problem with the government is the government, instead of saying, well, we need you to be more productive, they say, all right, we'll hire 5 more people.
Right.
And then now you're running what takes 5 people, or you have 5 people's worth of work, the work of 5 people to do, but you have 10 doing it.
Right.
So then you get complacent. And then now all of a sudden you got the work for 10 people to do. Well, this is more than we're used to. We're not able to get it done. Okay, here's 5 more people. And I feel like that's how the government works. And that I'm sorry, but if you have what should be the work for 5 people, you should have 5 people. You should be
I agree.
you should be asking for more productivity. And that's not saying, because I've worked jobs where full staff is 5 people and we have 2.
Mm-hmm.
There are situations like that, but I feel like in the government sector that doesn't happen. It's always we're full staff is 5, we're at 50.
Right.
Well, those 10 other people, like I understand you're taking away their job and their livelihoods, but again, they aren't needed. And if somebody's a year away from retirement, let them stay so they can retire. But if you have 23-year-olds that you just brought in that you really don't need, why are you hiring them in the first?
Right. And if
And
you
that's where I'm at.
realize, if the issue is like career based, and you realize that you're over allocating resources, then you could easily phase them out slowly too as people leave. Like the government jobs aren't permanent. Like you can easily just like do a rotation where it's your grandfathered into your position, then as it's phased out, and you can shrink that way.
Yeah.
It just feels like everything just keeps getting bigger and bigger as opposed to like shrinking and expanding and shrinking as needed.
Yeah. And I mean, if you say you have 50 people in one department, 20 in the other, right? Come tax time, the IRS needs more people. Train them so they can transfer over and help.
Right.
And then people are getting their returns back quicker. People are getting whatever quicker. Like, that's efficiency. That's having 10 workers in 2 departments and everybody's trained on both of them.
Mm-hmm.
You're down 2 in one department, good. Pull one from the other, and now you're both down 1, you're good to go. You're not going to lose as much productivity.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know about you, if I was a worker, right? And somebody said, hey, we're going to cross train you in these 3 things. That way, if they need help, you can help them.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck yeah. Sign me up. Because now on my resume, I added 2 new things that I never would have added.
Right.
But that's just me. That's my opinion.
I agree. And with that being said, we are over an hour, and I appreciate your contributions.
Thank you.
We didn't cover everything, obviously, but it's a big topic. But I think we had a good discussion.
Yeah.
It was a hearty discussion, and we'll talk about more hot button issues later on down the road. Cody had to step away, so he can't say goodbye. So I'll give the floor to you, James. You can say goodbye,
Goodbye, homies.
and we'll see you next week.